I'm Bex. I'm a campaign manager at Autism Bedfordshire, which is an autism charity supporting adults and children across Bedfordshire and now Hertfordshire and Milton Keynes. And I know we've got a spread of you from those different areas here, and kind of various of you that we've come into contact with. And those of you who have kind of come to one of our sessions before know what we've been doing, but a kind of quick brief summary. Over the last year we've been working on a campaign that we've called Hear Me See Me, and it has been focusing specifically on health inequalities that autistic adults face when accessing health services. And so we started off by researching. We talked to autistic adults across the east of England to kind of really understand where their challenges were and kind of where difficulties were. And then basically these sessions, this is the third of our kind of professionals sessions we've been running, have come out of a real want for us to be able to give you some information back, because we've been talking to all these people and realised that while training is difficult to come by, and while kind of there's so little time for different things and focuses on different things, we just want to feed back what adults are telling us and what the autistic community is saying, so that you can kind of know a little bit more. So that's where we're coming from. This is the third in the series of these sessions that we've been running. I will share the links to the others if you haven't been to any of the others, so that you can have a look at those. This one's focusing on advocacy and communication. And we had one quite recently that was focusing on sensory and kind of creating a sensory friendly environment. And then we had a much more general one right back at the beginning last year now. So yeah, I'll share the links for those later, but just as a kind of little bit. And then just quick housekeeping. I've talked through most of these, but just to kind of reiterate, questions in the chat, we will be checking, even if we don't get time to go through questions, because there are quite a lot of you on here. We do get sent a copy of everything that's said in the chat, so we'll come back to you and make sure that we get you an answer within the next couple of weeks. So please don't worry. A recording will also be available afterwards. I know a couple of people have already asked about that. And so if there are colleagues that would really benefit, I'll share all of that information afterwards, and equally slides and resource links will be shared. I also just want to reiterate here as well, this isn't CPD training or anything. Like, this is literally us talking about the experiences that we're seeing, and kind of professionals talking about what they are seeing. So unfortunately it doesn't count towards anything like that, but we're just trying to fill a bit of a gap, I guess, that we're hearing from lots of you in wanting more information and wanting to know what more you can do to support autistic adults. So agenda, you're kind of well into my welcome. I will soon be done, I promise, so we can crack on with the more interesting stuff. Pam is going to speak to you, who is one of our trustees actually at Autism Bedfordshire. And she's also an independent practitioner, trainer, advocate with over 25 years experience in health and social sector, supporting children and adults, and is a wealth of knowledge. So I'm really hoping that you get a lot out of her session. She's really encouraged questions, as I'm sure that she'll say to you when she does talk. So please do shoot them over into the chat. Then those of you who have attended our last session will recognise Keely and remember Keely. Keely is an autistic adult who is going to talk about her experience. And those of you who did attend last time know how eloquently and beautifully she speaks, and kind of how thought-provoking her thoughts are. So I'm really hoping that that's going to be really interesting to you all. And then we're going to end with me, and I'm just going to run through some thoughts on communication and different things that you can do to support and help adults in whatever kind of place you're working. So yeah, I really hope you enjoy. We are going to crack on, I promise, but I wanted a quick, why are we specifically focusing on communication and advocacy today? Why have we chosen this specifically? And obviously, I talked about this research that we've been doing and talking to adults. It was something that kept coming up, people not feeling understood, people really wanting different ways to be able to support them that weren't necessarily offered. And then there's also some relatively recent research, so was published early January of this year, that kind of completely backs that up. So they actually talked to both autistic adults and non-autistic adults to see who did report difficulty visiting. They were looking specifically at GPs here, and 80% of autistic adults, you can see, reported a difficulty in comparison with 37% of the non-autistic recipients. And I guess I just wanted to pull out, because these are big old stats of adults not feeling understood and reporting difficulty communicating with their doctor. So that was just a reminder, I guess, of why it's so important, and why I am hoping that you're going to get a lot out of today. So I am going to call up Pam, who I hope is here. I think I saw you on. Do we have Pam?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Pam. I am a trustee for Autism Bedfordshire. I deal mainly with safeguarding. That's a particular interest of mine. I'm an independent practitioner, and like Beck says, with many years' experience in the health and social care field. But predominantly my role is as an advocate, a statutory advocate. So Bex has asked me to come today to have a conversation with everybody to find out what advocacy is and when people need it and when people don't. So I will start. When you talk about advocacy, anybody can advocate. A sister for a brother, a mum for the son, a friend for a friend. We all advocate from time to time for each other. It's sticking up, it's making sure that that person's voice is heard. But what I'm going to be talking about today is professional statutory advocacy. Professional advocates don't have opinions, but we are guided by the Advocacy Charter. I think I've attached it somewhere. And we follow the Quality Performance Mark, or QPM. It's an assurance assessment for providers of advocacy in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And it's based on the principles contained in the Advocacy Charter. It enables providers to demonstrate how they're meeting the different standards. Statutory advocates follow law and legislation, the Care Act, the Mental Health Act, the Mental Capacity Act, and the Human Rights Act. We can and we do challenge decisions following due process. One of the confusions I deal with a lot is decision makers ask for my opinion, and I have to reiterate that advocates don't have opinions. One of our main roles is to promote the client's self-advocacy. So we will work to ensure that our client's voice is heard in the decision-making process. We can't promise our clients that they'll get what they want, but we can make sure that the decision maker has taken their thoughts into consideration. All advocates work towards the National Advocacy Qualification. It is a qualification that's recognised, and once they've completed that, they can choose different modules, for example, specialising in mental health or mental capacity or the Care Act. One of the things that I deal with on a regular basis is when our role is appropriate and when our role is not. So I thought I'd first of all cover, before I go into the different roles of a statutory advocate, when the person has a right to advocacy. So in the UK, citizens, they have many rights and responsibilities. There are different types of laws protecting the rights of individuals, from civil laws to criminal laws. Parental responsibility comes to an end when a person reaches the age of 18. However, the older the younger adult, the more say they will have in the decisions. There are two instances where this can end prematurely. When the child gets married between the ages of 16 and 18, or with an adoption order overriding the birth parent's responsibility. There is the only situation where somebody's next of kin would automatically have the legal right to make a decision on the person's behalf over 18, or under 18, sorry. This is the nearest relative, and I will go into that in more detail. It's a special term used by the Mental Health Act. It gives one member of the family the responsibilities if you are detained under the sections, mental health sections 2, 3, 4 or 37. If you have a community treatment order, you're under a guardianship, your nearest relative is not the same as your next of kin. When somebody is over 18, next of kin does not have any rights under the Mental Health Act. There is also deputyship. Deputyship is provided by the Office of Public Guardian. Appointees will have very narrow powers, limited to managing money from the Department of Work and Pension and acting on behalf of the individual who lacks capacity. Appointees are regulated by the Department of Work and Pension, and it gives considerably wider powers to make decisions and act on behalf of a person who lacks capacity on welfare issues or financial matters, both depending on what is laid down by an order from the Court of Protection. And then lastly, there is lasting power of attorney, where adults can give one person they trust the power to make a decision on their behalf when they lack capacity. This is over property and affairs or health and welfare. So with that in mind, often parents of older, over 18 adults with autism come in and ask for some support, and I have to explain to them that unless they hold any kind of legal rights, then they have no particular say in their older child's decisions. Usually it is a social worker, a care manager or a decision maker that will make those decisions. Do we have any questions in regards to what I've just spoken about, Bex?
Nope, no questions.
Nope. Does everybody know what an advocate or professional advocate is? Has everybody had experience of working with or referring to professional advocacy services? Just a hands up or a...
Yes,
okay.
we're getting some yeses, some no's.
Yes.
Quite a few hands up. Some
Good.
people have referred many times.
Good, good. I see, depending on different areas in the UK, it all goes down to commissioning. Statutory advocacy has to be commissioned, but the usual community advocacy, peer advocacy, non-instructed advocacy depends on where you live. Things can be spot purchased, but they need to go through commissioning and managers. But what I thought I'd talk about and give a few examples of was the 3 specific statutory roles that an advocate plays, and give some examples of the issues that we deal with and the problems that arise as a consequence. So in the UK, or in England and Wales, there are 3 statutory advocacy roles: the mental health, the mental capacity and the DOLS. An independent mental health advocate is a specially trained advocate who can support certain patients detained under the Mental Health Act. This exists as a safeguard for those detained under certain mental health acts or community treatment orders. I mentioned it a little bit earlier on, and the advocate can help them exercise their rights. We support them at ward rounds, CPAs, professional meetings. We help them access legal aid, support them at hearings and tribunals, requesting things like Section 17 leave. I work in the hospitals in London, the mental health wards. I go onto the wards, and usually the referrals come directly from the wards saying that For example, Mr. Smith is detained under Section 2 of the Mental Health Act. Please could you come in? Some hospitals automatically make a referral. As soon as somebody is detained, they contact me and say, I've got a Mr. Smith. Other times, in certain hospitals, they have a contract of an advocate who drops in. Unfortunately, some of the, what's the right word? Patients that are not detained are not entitled to. It's only if you're detained under specific acts that you can get some statutory advocacy. I'll give you an example. Last week, one of the hospitals contacted me and said there is a young man on the autistic spectrum. He is detained under the mental health section 2 for assessment. We feel that he would benefit from some advocacy support. I went to see him. He had communication issues and needed time to process what I was saying. So I took a lot of leaflets in because I understood that that's what he liked. One of the things that he was asking for was he wanted to go out. He had one of his routines was to go for a run, and of course the hospital was stopping him. So I spoke with the responsible clinician at one of the ward rounds. I tried to promote that self-advocacy, but my client was particularly nervous around other people and particularly nervous around men for some reason. So I advocated for some Section 17 leave. And after a little bit of toing and froing and asking and cajoling, he was allowed Section 17 leave for half an hour a day, supported and escorted. Sometimes when they ask for, when they're appealing their section and they're asking for some legal support, I can give them, I cannot choose a solicitor for them, but I can give them a list, or I contact the mental health legal system, and I am allocated or advised to have 3 specific legal representatives, and then the client will choose, or I will choose from that. Do I have any questions on the Mental Health Act?
There is a question not directly related to Mental Health Act, but there is a question. Do you have the same view that next of kin is a legal term referring to someone who deals with someone's affairs when they've died?
Can you say that again?
I can. Do you have the same view that next of kin is a legal term referring to someone who deals with someone's affairs when they have died?
As an advocate, I don't have a view. The law states that the nearest relative under the Mental Health Act has some powers to deal with that. I have also, flipping it on the other side, I had a client whose mother was their relevant person, and they did not want their mother to be their relevant person. And so it often argues the case. Some families, especially of older people on the autistic spectrum, feel that they have more rights and decisions about their child than they actually do, and sometimes it causes a lot of issues. But we just keep referring back to the Mental Health Act, and this is what that person, this is what the family member's rights are. There are different. Oh, I've just read a question as well. There are different rules for adults as there is for children. One follows the Mental Health Act and the other follows the Children's Act. Sometimes in the transition, there is some issues. Oh, just excuse me, my auto power is going to turn my screen off. Just 2 seconds. Thank you. So it all depends on what service. Unfortunately, there are not many specific services mental health services and mental health hospitals appropriate or made for people with autism. There is one just on the outskirts of London that has sensory rooms and has trained staff available and aware of autism and have a good knowledge of communication issues. But I have a couple on the wards that I work in one of the London hospitals that are on the autistic spectrum that unfortunately their mental health issues override their diagnosis, and that is the priority. And there is also a lack of bed space as well, and also discharge. I have a client who is fit for discharge, but we're having difficulty finding another placement. He's had assessments from now, I think 7 or 8 service providers who do not feel they can meet his needs, so he's still detained in hospital. So unfortunately that goes on. That's something that happens quite regularly. Do I have any other questions on the Mental Health Act?
None others that I can see.
Okay. Then I will move on to the Care Act, because this is one that often comes up. So a Care Act advocate can support certain people under the Care Act and the Social Services and Wellbeing Act in Wales. Not everyone is entitled to advocacy under the Care Act. There are 2 conditions. Person has substantial difficulty being involved with their assessment, care and support planning, a review, or in safeguarding, particularly Section 42 safeguarding. And if there is no one appropriate or available to support and represent their wishes. The person's well-being has to be at the centre of any decisions made, and the Care Act applies equally to adults with care and support needs and their carers. In some cases, it applies to children and young carers, and it also applies to young children over the age of 16 who are in transition to adult services. So I think that might answer the question about the age and under 18s and over 18s. The Care Act also includes prisoners. So some Care Acts, I myself often go around occasionally go around the prisons when somebody is having a needs assessment or a Care Act assessment or a review of the assessment. I deal a lot in my role with the Section 42 and the safeguarding. Often there is a controversy. I think I have 6 cases at the moment in regards to cuckooing, and which, does everybody know what cuckooing is? I'll say cuckooing is when there is a vulnerable person living alone in the community, and yes, they are coerced and people move into their property, and yes. And what I can do without going into too much detail on cuckooing is, if it's all right, Bex, we can add it to this, the relevant information afterwards.
Definitely, yeah, we'll do.
There are. It is becoming a recognised. It is becoming a recognised form of abuse now, and so I'm dealing with quite a few cases. Unfortunately, there is often issues around capacity and the person's capacity to understand that they are being abused versus an unwise decision. And so protective measures are often put in. We have safeguarding meetings and that kind of thing. For example, I have a young lady at the moment. She's on the autistic spectrum and has a mild learning disability, and she has been known to social services for many years. She was a looked after child, so doesn't have anybody, any family appropriate to consult or appropriate to support her. It takes a while for her to trust you. I'm a complete stranger coming in, so we are meeting, but she has been cuckooed, and she's in a relationship, or with her understanding, a relationship with the person, and she is very protective and defensive when people move it, you know, when professionals question her capacity. The person that is cuckooing her has coerced her, and what she wants is a relationship. And at the moment, he is asking her to do things that shouldn't be done. She doesn't really have the full understanding of, and so we are going through, at the moment, we are going through the courts, we have the police involved. So an advocate is making sure that in all the professional meetings that she, you know, is involved around her, that her voice is heard, and protective measures are put in to keep her safe. So at the moment, she has a key worker that visits her sort of once every day, and then they go out and they do social things. She does some shopping and living skills, and we're talking about money management, and so I'm involved in that to make sure, because one of the things is her slow processing, that she needs information in an accessible format to ensure that she's learning. One of the things mentioned in the Mental Capacity Act is that information in an accessible format. As an advocate, I often look at the mental capacity assessments, and one of the things that I often call back on is that the information was not in an accessible format. For example, one of my clients was deemed to lack capacity, but when I read the capacity assessment, they hadn't given enough time for due process. They had used open-ended questions when he worked better with closed-ended questions. They gave him too much choice. So that is quite a difficult thing to challenge. But we try and do it professionally, but on a way up. Do I have any other questions about a role of a Care Act advocate, and how to involve a Care Act advocate?
I don't know if you've just seen
Yes,
this.
I did. So at the moment, cuckooing is a keyword, and so if you look, just Google cuckooing, there are quite a few easy read versions of cuckooing. And so I've worked with her care manager and her key worker, and we put together some information in that accessible format so it can explain more of her rights and her choices, and the things that she doesn't have to do, she doesn't want to do, and if she's frightened, who to ask for help. It also, it's that promoting self-advocacy and making sure that she feels confident and secure, and that her voice is heard. At the moment, she is starting to become aware that some of the things her boyfriend is asking her to do may not be taking her into consideration. And so we're just, it's that slowly working with her to make sure that she knows where to go, because it has to be the least restrictive of her rights and freedoms, unless we have to follow due process, unless we have to make sure she's safe. We have a duty of care to keep people safe, so we follow due process. We've got the police involved at the moment, and so they're going through their processes as well. At the moment, Camden Police are doing a cuckooing awareness hour-long presentation for anybody that's interested in it. If you contact them, I say I've done with my team. I have half a dozen advocates under me and we signed up for that just to make people aware of what cuckooing is and the processes to follow. Did I answer the question?
I think so. We've had a couple more come through as well. So
Yeah.
how do we involve a Care Act advocate? I think is the first, and then kind of it goes on further from that. Someone's asking what organisation should we refer to?
So if you need to be a decision maker. Decision makers are usually the local authority or the CCG, care managers. If you look in your local council, on your local council website, they will give you the contact details of your local advocacy service. It's a Google question, who's my local advocacy service, and you put in your postcode. The referrer, it is the referral, the decision maker, that generally makes the referral. It would be beneficial, or it might be beneficial. I give lots of PowerPoint presentations on an advocate's role and remit. You contact your local advocacy service, and they would be more than, I'm saying, I should think they'll be more than happy to come round and give a little presentation on how to get involved and how to make referrals and when to make referrals and who to make referrals to. And what was the next question?
Yeah, I think you covered it, because it was just asking specifically around organisations that we should refer to. But I guess, as you say, it's like very specific on area, isn't it?
Yes, in Bedfordshire, Power had the contract, and now it's taken over by Voiceability. Advocates have, or advocacy services have commission contracts for however long a time, and once that commission has gone out, then it's up to tender, and then who can have the best deal wins the contract. Generally speaking, advocates are two-peed. I've been an advocate for many years, and I've been two-peed now from 7 times. Power, to Rethink, to Camden Advocacy, to Total Voice, Voiceability, and you generally have the same team, just a different name on the top of your headings and your notes. Lots of advocates have specific skills. So, for example, my specific skills is information in accessible format. One of my colleagues' specific skills is in Mental Health Act. Another one of my colleagues specialises in housing issues. So it's one of those things where you contact your local advocacy service, introduce yourself, and ask them what you need to do. Have I answered everybody's questions?
Yeah.
Bex? Yeah. How long have I got, Bex?
Yes, another 15-20 minutes if you would like to.
Okay. So finally, the third statutory advocates are mental capacity advocates. These are specially trained advocates who support certain people under the Mental Capacity Act. They support them with 4 different decisions: a change or a move of accommodation, a serious medical treatment, a social care review, or safeguarding. I thought I'd talk a little bit about each of those, if that was okay. I'm a mental capacity advocate, and I deal with all of them. When somebody has family appropriate to consult, then an IMCA, an independent mental capacity advocate, is not appropriate. If they are deemed inappropriate to consult, then we can come in. Appropriate family can mean a variety of things. I'm supporting a client at the moment. He has a mother, but her mother has dementia, so she's not appropriate to consult. this is one of the most common issues I have with referrals, is that the social worker, the decision maker, the care manager has taken what the family say into consideration and is using it as part of that best interest. And so I say, well, if you're doing that, sometimes the family are disagreeing, and I'm saying disagreeing is not a valid reason for deeming them inappropriate. If you're taking what they're saying into consideration, then they are appropriate to consult. One of the only times that when there's family appropriate to consult, one of the only times an IMCA can come in is in the safeguarding. So I can be supporting a family or a client who has family appropriate to consult with the safeguarding and the section 42. Usually we have what's called protective measures that come in. So, for example, if there is financial abuse, for example, then the protective measure would be the social worker or the care manager applying for appointeeship or deputyship, and that a new bank card or a new bank account is opened until the issue is sorted. So these are protective measures. One of the other issues that come in as an IMCA is that referrals are made way too late sometimes. I had one last week with the best interest meeting the following week. I hadn't even met the client. I spoke to the decision maker. What I do is I go in, I speak to the client as much as possible. Sometimes my clients are on life support and not able to communicate, but I try and get as much information about the client from their GPs, their social workers, their care managers, their key workers, their friends, whoever, and then I write a report and I send it to the decision maker, and then after that a best interest meeting should happen, and then the decision maker would take what I say into consideration and what my client's views are into consideration. As an advocate, as a mental capacity advocate, I have the power to argue and take the decision to the Court of Protection if I don't agree with it, but that has to follow due process. In regards to a change of accommodation or a move to accommodation, a lot of my clients have been taken into hospital. So I've got a lady at the moment, she has had a fall, and the hospital have a duty of care to discharge to a place of safety. The social workers come in and they've looked around her property. She does a little bit of hoarding. She's on a third floor, so she cannot walk up the stairs. She doesn't have a care package in place. There is an issue about her mobility. There is an issue, she doesn't have any hot running water. There is no washing machine. She uses her, she doesn't use her bathroom, she uses a bucket, so infection control. So the hospital have contacted me as their decision maker for the discharge planning, and then I will communicate with the client and the MDT to find out, should the client have had capacity, what would she have wanted? The other thing that often comes in to a move or a change of accommodation is things like, perhaps the lady has a tenancy agreement. Does she have capacity to end that tenancy agreement? So often it opens up quite a few other issues. Do I have any questions on the change or move to accommodation?
So I have got someone who's just said, we are in a GP surgery. If a patient over 18 arrives with a pushy advocate, how do we question or check this if they do not have capacity themselves?
Generally, if there is an advocate, a professional advocate involved, then the referral would have come from a social worker, a care manager, and so it's I'd be contacting the local authority to see if there is any professionals involved with that client at the time. An advocate, I think one of the job descriptions is that confidence to challenge. We should promote self-advocacy and support the client to make sure that they're happy to explain their views, but sometimes in different settings they find it a little bit uncomfortable, and advocates often challenge. Is there anything specific that you want me to know? Because I'd say Bex has just pulled up this self-advocacy booklet, and this is an excellent booklet. It's by the National Autistic Society. Have I answered that question?
Let us know, Corinne, if you want any more detail or if anything else. There's so much, isn't there, Pam?
There is. I mean, if you feel as a professional, if you feel the advocate is not working in a professional way, then you can also find out what the advocacy service is and contact their line manager, you know, with a compliment, a concern, or a complaint. One of the things we often forget with social workers, care managers, doctors, professionals, is people make complaints, but not many people make compliments. If you're also happy with how the advocate acted, let their line manager know just as much as if you're unhappy with them. Am I okay to move on to the next bit?
Yes, she said thank you.
So another one is a serious medical treatment. Advocates are involved in serious medical treatments. I have a client at the moment. He is he can communicate, but he has drug and alcohol issues, and he has a history of self-neglect. The proposed treatment is that the doctor wants to amputate his leg. He has an infection in his leg. He injects heroin under his toes and in his leg, and there is an infection that would possibly lead to sepsis and death. And so that is one of the issues that I'm dealing with at the moment. The gentleman has said he doesn't want his leg removed. He doesn't want his leg removed. He lives in a third floor flat. He wouldn't be able to access his flat. We had a best interest meeting on Friday, and the decision was that the serious medical treatment should go ahead and his leg should be amputated. He didn't want that, and I ensured that the client's voice was heard. I did not, I didn't give my opinion, but I made sure that the services knew that the client did not want it to happen. At the moment, he had to be brought in under like a 136. It's when somebody is removed from their property when they're refusing, and an order has been made now to keep him in hospital to remove his leg. So it can be quite difficult. Unfortunately, I'm there with end of life planning and end of life planning and turning off life support. So it can be quite difficult. I've just seen a question come up about the leg. Could you say it again?
Yes.
Yeah, removal from property is 135. Sorry, not 136. That's my mistake.
Yes, someone was just saying, was the leg amputation, was he deemed to lack capacity for the
So
decision?
he was deemed to lack capacity. One of the arguments that I put ahead was that one of the reasons he was deemed to lack capacity was because of his drug and alcohol. And one of the things noted in the Mental Capacity Act is this decision urgent? Could it wait? If we waited, let's say 3 weeks, would that person have capacity to make that decision? It's very much a thing where it's issue specific, and at that moment in time, he did not have capacity. He may have capacity in a few weeks' time, but the doctors, the consultants, there was quite a few in the room, were saying that because of the blood poisoning, the sepsis, that he would possibly not live until the end of the week, and so something had to be done. Doctors can, or decision makers can, do emergency decisions. They don't have to involve an advocate with all their decisions. If something needs to happen here and something needs to happen now, then they can follow their due process. But if it's a decision that needs a bit of consideration and there is a time with it, then if a decision can be made at a later date, they will. Okay. Son would prefer to die. I didn't understand the question, Bex.
No, I wonder if that's related. So this Dorothy had put a previous question in. What if care manager does not understand person with ASD and they are wanting to let him have a relationship with someone who is harmful to them?
One of the things that can be done is to talk to the decision maker, talk to the decision maker, talk to their manager. It's very difficult. It's around capacity. Does that person have capacity to make that decision? You have to assume capacity unless you have concerns or there is due process being followed. So if that person has capacity and it is seen as an unwise decision, then it's quite difficult. But the other thing that can be done is to put in some kind of support or education. So there is quite a few, there's a lot of information about healthy relationships and boundaries and safeguarding and when to report and who to report to, that are aimed towards people with autism or learning disabilities or physical disabilities. But if you have any concerns, it's to raise those concerns, to speak with the care manager, to speak with their manager, or if it is a safeguarding concern, then contact your local safeguarding board and talk it over with them. Has that answered the question? Bex?
I think that was helpful. We'll see if Dorothy puts anything else on. But I know, Dorothy, you're talking because I know Dorothy. I think I know who this is, and I know that you're talking about a really specific case. So it might be that you want some kind of advice separately on that specific one. So please feel free. I know that you've got my contact details, Dorothy, and maybe we'll catch up post this chat.
Okay, and then if I move on, the last thing that mental capacity advocates can be involved in is care assessments or a Care Act review, and we come in and we generally work with the social worker, the care manager, and it's an assessment of needs and have their needs changed or do they have needs. So bye. I'm reading as I go along.
Sorry, yeah, I think someone's just put one more question around the leg amputation.
Okay.
So if capacity is assumed, why was the decision to remove his leg made against his wishes? Does the right to have an unwise decision get overruled by life or death situations?
Yes, basically.
And then
it was life or death, as in it was urgent. The decision needed making urgently. If they were trying to prolong, but he was refusing the support, he was refusing to take the medication, he was refusing to have the wounds cleaned, he was refusing to refusing all care and support and treatment, and he had a blood test, and there was the start of an infection, and because of his health, he the doctor felt they needed to make the decision, or doctors sometimes feel they need to make the decision there and then, and it can be really difficult, and they have to follow due process because they are the decision makers, and they have to justify why they have come to that decision and why they could not leave it, and the doctors will be challenged by their managers and the hospital boards. So it's not something that they take light, and generally speaking, most. So yeah, the clinicians felt he did not have capacity. I looked, I had a copy of the issue-specific capacity assessment. He also had a court order bringing him in and keeping him in hospital. One of the other things that I said was the order was until the decision was made. And so once the decision has been made, then he would be entitled to, he would be under constant supervision and control and not free to leave, and didn't have an order. That would mean that he'd be deprived of his liberties. So a dole's authorisation, an emergency authorisation needed putting in, and that's something that an IMCA can do on the side. Got a hand. You want to see what the hand is, Bex?
I'm just a bit conscious of time.
I've nearly finished. So.
Awesome. I'm just going to switch the slide because basically Pam has provided all sorts of really useful things, and some of this you might have seen before. But I just wanted to make sure that they can see this flow chart as well, and we'll obviously share this on with them. But it's a kind of it's a way to find out if referrals needed, isn't it, Pam?
Yes, I've looked. So I've been doing this a long time, and this by Kate Mercer training gives the most simple, plain reasons why you should and why you shouldn't, and how to do it and where to do it. Does the local authority believe, and the local authority must, and so that's a good one. But it's generally speaking, if you have any questions, you contact your local advocacy service, and they will be able to support or signpost you to other relevant services. How much more have I got? Because I've just got one more thing to say.
Yeah, the only other thing that I put on, because so I'd put on your links, and again, Pam has provided such useful links because we know how much information there is around things like this, and also how specific different cases are, right, and different things. And yes. So we wanted to kind of be able to provide this, and Pam's kind of provided a selection of some of the most useful ones. But I guess I wanted to also say, because we were talking Pam previously about how important it is that you're engaged early, and I guess kind of when we think about who we've got on this call, I know there's lots of people who are engaging with advocates, and so I just wanted to kind of give you the opportunity to talk about how useful that is in things.
I think referrals sometimes are emergencies, but generally speaking, when I look at some of the referrals that come through to me, the case has been open with the decision maker for days, weeks, months, and then the decision needs making at the end of the month, and I get the referral the week before, they seem to find out that, oh, we need to involve an advocate, and so it's quite difficult. I say, well, until I've met with the client and found out what they want and written a report or followed due process, a decision cannot be made. So it's better to involve an advocate as early as possible. And then we could always say, no, we don't need to be involved. But at the last minute, when there is safeguarding issues or emergency decisions that need made, that sort of takes away the client's rights, doesn't it? Do you need me to go any further into anything? The one thing that I have to say, that the Mental Health Act is currently being updated, and the Mental Capacity Act is currently being updated. So I'm just following what they're doing at the moment. There's going to be that deprivation of liberty safeguard. The code of practice is for somebody that's under constant supervision and control and not free to leave. It was supposed to be changing last year, and now they moved it to next year. But one of the things that I come across most commonly is people living in their own homes that are under constant supervision and control, not free to leave, and there is no order around them to keep them there. They're right, they've been deprived of their liberties, but due process hasn't been followed. So that's one of the main things that I deal with, is that deprivation of liberty. And that's what IMCAs can come in and do, that the litigation friends and the court of protection stuff. I think I've run out of time. I could talk. Usually when I give this, it's like a whole day with an hour in between for a coffee and a catch up. But
Yeah,
contact Becky if you've got any specific questions, and I will try and get hold of everybody and answer them.
Thanks so much, Pam. And like, you're so right, normally these are huge, hefty sessions, and we have just kind of wanted to give you a little view, because obviously we're talking about then further along today communication and self-advocacy and other things. So it is just a snapshot. Please do send questions over, and I'll make sure you get answered. But thank you so much, Pam.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm going to hover around for a little bit anyway, but you shut me off now.
Awesome. Perfect.
Thank you.
So Keely, if you're around, you will then need to put on your camera if you would like it, or unmute yourself. Great. Hello.
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. How are you, Keely?
Morning. Yeah, good, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Keely, for coming along. And we're just going to take kind of a couple of questions, and you're going to chat through some of your experiences. So what does advocacy mean to you, Keely?
Personally, if I think of it in a logical point, I suppose, I don't know if anybody knows, but I am autistic. So hence where I fit into this. But I think of obviously all the different styles of RSPCA and helping with mind and Autism Bedfordshire, and on a personal note, advocating for my children or my animals, but it's actually an incredibly personal thing to me, because at times I can get really overwhelmed and go mute in situations that I don't predict or are too overwhelming. So for me, it means having the freedom. If you know, advocacy is having the freedom, the ability to speak when someone needs advocacy. It means that they're not being heard, and if they're not heard, they're invisible. And when I'm invisible, I'm lost.
Yeah, and as you said so well, as well, you don't always know when those situations are going to be, right? It's not as easy maybe as being able to say, at this point I will be able to communicate, and this I won't. I'm wondering if you can tell us about a time that you did feel empowered and able to communicate in a healthcare scenario.
Yeah. At Great Ormond Street Hospital, my son's a patient there, and he was booked in for a procedure that meant we'd have to stay for 5 days. I was really anxious about being the best mum that I could be for my little boy, knowing that how he reacts is important, how I react shows him how to behave. But obviously, being autistic, I'm thinking about the new environment, the new people, the voices, the noises, the lights, the complete change of routine. It had to be at a time, of course, when we were in COVID, so no one's allowed to come with me and my son. So it was just the two of us without any support or a tag team for when I got overstimulated. So I was really, even before I went, I was beginning to get anxious and trying to work out, how do I be the best mum? In the end, I plucked up the courage and actually rang the ward that he was going on to, and they got the sister of the ward to call me back. And I was so nervous because I felt ashamed, embarrassed. I spend a lot of time bluffing my disabilities, so to expose it is really difficult for me. So this was a really huge thing to get past. I'm not very good at standing up for myself. I'm good at standing up for everybody else, but with me, it seems to scramble my brain. But the fear of letting my boy down made that outranked anything. So it pushed me to call, and to be fair, that the sister was amazing. She asked what my worries were. I explained about my autism and my sensory concerns, and the changing of the wards, the staff, the light changes, the noises, the smells, and that I feared I wouldn't be able to be as good a mum as I needed to be because of all the other things I'd be taking on. And that all I was praying for was a possible side room, just to slow down the traffic, calm down the lights, and that I was as a kind of coping strategy. And I felt really rude, but I was desperate. And if there was any chance, then it was worth it. So thank goodness the ward sister agreed. This seemed a really sensible strategy, that she'd ensure it at the end of a corridor where there was less movement if possible as well. And she also managed to move all of his tests, like his blood tests, that usually you'd go to a different department for, and his scans before his procedures, to be taken in the ward where possible, in his room, so that we weren't wandering around the hospital and I wasn't getting even more overstimulated and overloaded and confused and running out of spoons. So that was phenomenal. I thanked her for her understanding. We hung up the call, and I realised how huge it was, because I just promptly burst into tears and just sobbed. The relief, just the immense relief that I could control the environment just a little when I got there. And as it turned out, my son's surgery didn't go to plan. He got very seriously ill, and that side room became our home for weeks. And then we'd have a week back where he tried to recover at home, and then we'd go back in, and they did everything to try to keep that room for him so that I wasn't readapting. And they would continue making sure that everything was in the same locations when they knew we were coming, so that I could do certain routine, like changing his bed, which I know they can do, but it gave me something to do. And they'd make sure that stuff was in a cupboard that I could access. But it all stemmed from that phone call. And I know when it ended up being months. There is no way on earth I would have coped without that syndrome. And yeah, so an example of me voicing up and actually being heard and being empowered, definitely the award would go to Great Ormond Street.
We heard, like, it's just worth mentioning that kind of, because Keely was one of the key people when we were researching this and we started this campaign and we were talking to everybody. This was not a kind of lone voice, I guess. Like, we were hearing from lots of people that they have autistic children and that they felt like they could be an advocate for their children, but actually being an advocate for themselves was so much harder, because being like fighting for your child feels like something different from feeling like you're being a nuisance or you're being difficult.
It's a logical thing. You can see a child has a right to this, so you then stand up and voice. But when it comes to yourself, it's, for me personally, it's such a blur. I can't work it out. I can't think it through. I can't break it down. Yeah, so it doesn't. I just end up getting more overwhelmed if it's, and things just don't process until after it's happened.
And it just made such a difference, didn't it? Like that like support. And I guess, like, we know that not everyone has resource in the same ways, or like that, and it's difficult, but actually those changes made such an impact to both you and your son, because you were able to be there in the way that you needed to be.
And I wasn't expecting much. I was just praying just for a little side room, if possible, for a couple of days. I didn't expect it to turn to months. I didn't expect them to be as amazing as they were. But I definitely know I wouldn't have coped the way he needed me to if I hadn't been in that side room.
Thanks, Keely. Can you tell us about a time that you felt like your voice wasn't heard, or a more challenging time?
They're easier. Sadly, there's a lot of times that I've tried to communicate and they've fallen flat. The particular stressors are the procedures that have particularly come in since COVID around the doctor's surgeries, where you have to make a phone call at 8 a.m. to make an emergency appointment to see or speak to a doctor. And I mean, I don't know about other surgeries, but mine, if you don't get it, then you don't get an appointment. And in the morning is my hard time. My brain is at its most foggiest. I'm most sensory aware. I struggle with doing the morning routine with 2 children. And my daughter is autistic, and I have to transport her to college and make sure she's in safe settings. So that takes longer than most people would. And so talking to a GP or to a receptionist at 8 a.m. just is, I do what I'm doing now. I stutter and stumble and stammer, and I can't explain yet what my issue is, because I've only just got to the point of realizing I need the emergency appointment. So, for example, if my asthma is really severe and I'm struggling and my inhalers aren't doing what they should be doing, and I know that I probably need to go on a nebulizer at the surgery and go on steroids, and I'm trying to explain that, but because I'm lacking oxygen, my brain is confused, I can't talk. So, I mean, I can remember that as a severe attack triggered at about 7:30 one morning. And I was trying to get my breathing under control, and my chest was tight. I remember that I was struggling. My mind, as I said, was going sluggish. My heart was beginning to race. I'm beginning to experience heavy fatigue from struggling with the breathing, but I have 2 children that would be incredibly frightened if they saw me struggling. So I try and mask it and put on a bluff for a few minutes and sort them out, and then I go and I call the doctors at the 8 o'clock that they want, and I'm trying to prep what I need to say, but you have a loud music going in your ear with interactive information going, and so you're concentrating to make sure it's not them, and then you're back off and on and off and on, and then by the time you've got down to the 20 minutes to be spoken to, understandably, that receptionist is very frustrated, and the world around is overwhelmed, and I will try to explain, but I'm lacking oxygen, I'm lacking communication skills. And this one time I particularly remember, I really tried. It took 35 minutes before she took the call, and I explained I was autistic. I explained that I probably had a chest infection and my asthma, and I needed to see someone, but it didn't come out as fluidly as I tell you now. I'm reading that off a piece of paper. It was a lot more ifs and buts and stilted, and in the end they got rather frustrated and said, well, if you need to call back tomorrow because all the emergency appointments are gone. And I explained that I'd started ringing at 8 and that didn't matter because they'd all gone. And I ended up going by ambulance that night to hospital because it got even worse. But it's telephone communication, and you don't. If I speak to you, Beck, I've known you a while, so I can talk to you fluidly like I can at the moment because it's you I'm looking at. But if somebody I didn't know, I had to talk, it wouldn't come out so well. It wouldn't come out so fluid. If I'm fatigued or confused or struggling with sensory issues, I can so easily go kind of a jumbled mute. And then I'm just pleading with my eyes, and I desperately need somebody to see. But they don't. They just see they visually see me and judge me that there can't be anything going on inside. And when I try to self-advocate and people misunderstand, it sends me mute, and then I disappear, and it's more likely to end up in self-neglect than a resolution.
It's such an important point because it's something that has been echoed by lots of people as we've been talking, that kind of we've had lots of people who feel like they're judged and that they're looked at, and like, you seem eloquent and you seem to be able to speak and you seem like, lots of people use the word intelligent, don't they? And it's like, this is nothing to do with it. Like, it's different scenarios and different situations, and actually, like, just because you seem that you're someone who doesn't need that support, it doesn't mean. I think one of our members like said it, that like, just because I don't need support right now, it doesn't mean that when I'm in that anxious, terrified state that I don't need support. Like, and she was like, I feel like a completely different person. And it's kind of feeling that judgment and that not knowledge of that could happen. I guess that's the really tough bit. I've just seen that a question's popped up, Keely, of someone saying, what would you feel would help with making appointments, like, and they've asked kind of online appointments, but I'm just wondering if you wanted to.
For me, I've heard of one good scheme, which is when someone's rung in, if it has to be a phone call, it's flagged up on the system as being autistic, and then they have a direct designated GP. So then that person just messages and communicates through email or message in the system to stick to that. So then it cuts down so much of the communication. I know that statistically autistic people die a lot younger. And that doesn't surprise me at all. For those that were on the last training might remember that story that I shared, but I will do anything to avoid hospitals and doctors for the sheer exhausting experience. If it was either like I say, a linked one person that you would be able to email or text to say that you need an appointment, but instead of you get some random person after you've been waiting an erratic amount of time, and then you've got to work off their mood. So yeah, different styles and abilities to communicate instead of this one bullet point. A lot of autistic people that I spend time and communicate with, a fascinating one I heard the other day, they actually said to me, if I could dress for work at 11 a.m, I would dress completely different to the way I do at 8:30. And it's because in the morning, we were both the same. We are so sensory aware. We need to be comfortable and cozy to feel secure before we can start functioning in other things. But that is a good kind of weird example of how there are so many aspects that come in. It's so hard to explain why but all of these different things are coming in all at once, and you're just trying to balance them all on top of the normal world.
Gosh, I can see more questions popping up. I'm so running out of time. Of course, I knew I should have put in more time. I'm just having a look through the questions to see if there's anything that it would be. Yeah, so someone said, would the option of how you communicate with the surgery be a helpful thing? And I think that's exactly what you're getting at, isn't it, Keely? That, like, as Keely said, there's other people that she talks to that aren't the same, and it is that individualized version of things. Like, Keely can't speak for all autistic adults, and it's not something that is the same, which I think is why people find it such a challenge, right? Because we're used to in life ticking boxes and being like, we'll do this for this group of people, and it's not really that. But I guess that's why communication is so important, and why we wanted to kind of emphasize it. And in the slides that I'm going to slightly race through after this, that I wanted to kind of talk to about those different ways and how you can figure it out. I don't know, Keely, if you're sticking around, and if, like, you want to kind of look through what people are saying, and if you feel comfortable and there's anything that you can answer. But otherwise, I will look back through after I've finished. And thank you again, Keely, so much.
And if there are any we've missed, just send them in an email and I'll send it to you, and then we can send them out if that helps.
Totally.
One very quick 20-second thing is, I would strongly suggest to anyone, if you've heard of Soundbite, the app, there is a BBC, it's called 1800 Seconds on Autism, and it's hosted by two autistic people, Jamie Knight and Robin Stewart, and they have people call in about autism and the different things, and they discuss different topics. But there's a particular one called I Don't Know How Much Pain I'm In, and it talks about Jamie's experience going into hospital and what it was like for him for communication and what happened. And even I was like, that's such a great way of explaining the different things that can happen to you. So, I mean, the whole podcast I listen to personally, but it is really good. And if you just have time to listen to one short one, it's I Don't Know How Much Pain I'm In, I think would really benefit anybody in the healthcare sector.
What was the name of the podcast again, Keely? And
it's called 1800 Seconds on Autism. It's part of the BBC.
Awesome. I'll share it with you all in the email with resources afterwards. I know loads of people are saying thank you, and that's incredibly useful, Keely. Thank you. You're a superstar. Thank you so much. You're getting tons of rounds of applause as well. Lots of thank yous. Okay, I'm going to slightly race through. Oh, we've got, yeah, Shana agrees it's a fantastic podcast. Here we go, people sharing it. Fab. Thanks, Keely, so much. I'm just going to pop you off while I put on my final things, but yeah, thank you again.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks. Bye. Okay, so I will slightly frantically race through. I was going to share with you a video that has that's some more voices from the people that we talk to. I'm not going to share it only because I'm trying to race through some stuff, but I'm going to include it in the resources, so please go and have a look. It's just some more of our adults talking about different things and different ways that they like to be communicated to and by. I'm not going to labour this point because this is kind of what we've talked about, but just because someone is articulate, it doesn't mean they've understood you. Even though they seem to kind of be really clear and understanding, and they talk really eloquently, it doesn't mean that they are kind of taking in and processing things in the same way. So I guess just kind of being aware of that. I know it's so hard because it feels like we want to give you a like toolkit of being like, well, do this in this scenario, but it really is about listening to that person and making that initial communication to start that conversation about what it would be. And I guess that's what is so important. We've talked about advocates in a statutory sense and in a when you call in an advocate, but actually in order to create an environment where people can self-advocate and can advocate for themselves, that communication is so vital because they need to feel comfortable and able to kind of really talk about what they need in that moment. Be clear. Now, I think this is probably one of the kind of biggest autism stereotypes, so potentially nothing new here in terms of kind of be as literal as you can with language, but it is so important to use clear, concise language and kind of avoid these things like sarcasm and figurative language and idioms as well. I've put a couple of examples there, but like just be as clear as possible. Because lots of people just find it difficult to really understand what it is you're saying if already you're taking more time and more energy to try and interpret what's going on in that communication. Anything kind of additional, trying to navigate whether that's true or false is really, really challenging. Long medical words obviously can be overwhelming for people to process, and using too much language. And I guess like the really kind of key thing that I want you to take away from here is to keep to one topic at a time. I'm awful at kind of managing to, my mind skips from topic to topic, as I'm sure there are lots of people out there that do, but it's really hard and challenging, especially when you're finding that interaction more difficult, to try and keep with that person as they're jumping from topic to topic. So really try and take one topic at a time and give time before you move to the next topic. Like there will be times that you need to discuss multiple things and kind of pass on that information. So maybe then consider writing down the kind of things that you talked about, just as a kind of prompt to go back over. Avoid open-ended questions, and kind of this is one that can be really challenging because it's kind of encouraged in a lot of spaces, like especially in kind of mental health spaces and services. But you really need to keep questions short and kind of be really specific, give options as examples, because again, when we're talking about this energy that people are spending on just trying to navigate that communication, and they've already been through a surgery that's kind of tapped into lots of their sensory sensitivities, and they're already uncomfortable and anxious about what they're talking to you about, it's then even more complex and they've got even less energy to kind of navigate that conversation. So just make it as easy as possible to do. Processing information, I think Keely kind of mentioned briefly as well, but I guess the main kind of takeaway from this, we had lots and lots of people in our research talking to us about the fact that they sometimes feel patronised when they do ask for people to speak more slowly, and it really doesn't need to be patronising. Like it is just allowing time. And I think like the most important thing is maybe to ask a question or to say a sentence and allow that time. It can feel really uncomfortable for us as humans who are used to just talking and talking and talking, but allowing that time and that pause for that person to really engage, process, and then be able to respond. I've put here consider double appointments. Obviously, with the Equalities Act, it's completely reasonable for people to request a double appointment when they want to process things and to kind of take their time. But I guess like when we're talking about like Keely made it really clear where she said that she finds it really hard advocating for herself sometimes and for requesting these things because they feel like an imposition. So maybe if you're noticing that that person is taking longer to process things, maybe seeing like, would it be useful if we had a double appointment next time? Would it be useful to give more time? Kind of being proactive with stuff like that, because people don't always feel confident or kind of in the space to be able to request that themselves, I guess. I'm so aware of time. I promise that I'm nearly done, but remember this is recorded, so please, if you do need to rush off, I know that you've already taken time out, I will make this available, and obviously you'll get all of these slides, so as I'm speeding over things, you will be able to kind of take some more time. We obviously had our last session like this was about sensory specifically, so I'd really invite you, if you haven't already seen that, to go back and have a look at that, because it talks about sensory in more detail. But that can really kind of slow processing time, because as I said, if you're already spending your energy trying to kind of focus yourself when there's so many other things going on, that can be a real difficult thing. So notice if in your practice room, if there's a ticking clock or something really noisy or a really specific smell, notice these things and kind of consider how you could make that easier, I guess, and help with the processing time. And then facial expressions was a really interesting one, because we had kind of mixed people talking about this. Again, I think eye contact is is a thing that people are aware of, that actually it can be physically painful for autistic adults, and like that can be really challenging. So don't necessarily force it. But what we were getting a lot of from people who I guess find communication more challenging is that they know that a smile is friendly and nice, and actually a lot of professionals, when they're taking on the other points that we've made about asking specific questions and kind of allowing processing time, they can almost get less smiley, because they're more kind of, it feels maybe uncomfortable, I guess, just asking a really specific question and not being so, I guess, flowery with language or talking a little bit more. So I guess really think about that. Think about smiling and not looking too stern, because it does seem really intimidating, and even though maybe it feels more uncomfortable having a smile when not necessarily speaking in a way that is more natural, I guess just think about that. But equally, not relying on non-verbal communication, using those questions as specific as possible to get the information over that you need to. I just wanted to highlight again here useful resources for patients, and this is stuff that you can create. We have been creating ones, and I know some people got in touch with us last time about helping to support them. But like video walkthroughs of where your appointments are held, it can just make such a difference, because that person already knows what to expect. So they come into your environment feeling like they've spent less energy, because they've got that kind of I guess, first look at where things are going, using visual stories in terms of environment, but also the staff that maybe they'll meet. I know can be challenging because of resource and kind of changeover of staff, but can be so useful. Hospital passport, autism passport, and then the one that Pam highlighted earlier, which is quite a thorough version, but this self-advocacy pamphlet that really does cover everything. So all of these different resources that you can point towards for patients, that you can have options of. Easy read versions of documentation. I know lots of you are already doing that. Communication cards as well, and I've included some that we've created. specifically as part of this campaign, that are free to access. You can print them off. They can be used for, there's kind of some specific Zoom type cards, but you could use them in person as well, just to allow people who are finding it a bit more of a challenge to get across what they want to say, maybe those starts in conversation. So again, I'm going to share this all with you. Hopefully there'll be some things that you can use, and I also just wanted to include links for those workshops as well, because I keep referring to them. The first one is a more general workshop. It was kind of feedback and going into the kind of things that people had talked to us about, and more of an overview. And then we went into this sensory friendly practices, and because of hearing the demand and hearing what people needed. And so again, we've done this with communication and advocacy. We wanted a snapshot, but obviously there's so much more that we could say and can. We just want to be able to fit little things into your day so that you can get access. I am also taking a breath, trying to churn through my slides, thanks to everyone who is still on, but I'm going to send over a survey. We've got no plans at the moment. We were doing a set of 3 of these sessions, but we'd love to hear from you, and if there is anything else that like if we can think about the future, what we can help support with. Any questions at all for any of our presenters, for me, please send them over, and I'll try and get you an answer as soon as possible. All of these things, I'll package it up nicely so you've got one email with tons of different links and resources, so that you can see where everything is. But I really hope it has been helpful.